Hey guys, welcome back. I've got Belle here with me, and her and I were on the news this week.
A Marion man says his pet snake of 12 years has disappeared.
And it wasn't for a good reason. I was sitting around watching TV last weekend with my wife, and she was scrolling on her phone and came across a Facebook group post for lost pets that said somebody had lost a 6-foot long red-tailed boa in the town right next to ours. And we live in Iowa, so not the climate for a boa who typically lives in Central or South America. Needless to say, the post garnered quite a bit of attention on the Facebook post within the group that was posted in. And a lot of people were positive, but I'd say there were even more that were negative.
Tear. I'm not a fan of snakes.
Pretty crazy. There's a 6-foot pet snake.
People saying to the effect that they were going to move out of the town. Not helpful conversation in this case where somebody's trying to find their lost pet. So I really didn't think much of it. You know, said, oh man, that stinks. I hope they find it before it gets too cold or it gets injured or eaten by a coyote or something like that. But later on in the week, I was at work and I got a call on my cell phone from a local number, so I answered it. And it turned out to be one of the local news stations. They wanted to interview me about the red-tailed boa and ask questions along the lines of, was it a threat to anybody? Was it a threat to pets? And where might it be hiding? What should people do if they find it? Stuff along the lines of that. And initially I didn't want to do it, but then I thought, you know what, I better, because if they don't find anybody, people are just going to run with their own imagination on what to do if they find this animal or see this animal and potentially hurt it because they're afraid of snakes. So I took the girls with me. We brought Belle and we did the news interview. I will link it in the description down below. We got a good opportunity to kind of dispel any panic that was going on, tell people to remain calm, and if they found it, to contact the owner or animal control so that it could get back to its owner safely. I thought this would be a good opportunity to go over what to do if you were to lose your pet snake or one of your pet snakes. You are going to be keeping snakes. You're probably going to have one get out of its enclosure, and you're going to want to know what to do when that happens. So the first thing you're going to want to do is remain calm. Chances are your snake hasn't gotten far. These guys do not want to be out in the open. They're going to travel under as much cover as possible at night and along walls. So there's going to be the first places you check after you check in the enclosure. This means behind backgrounds, in decor. I had a baby corn snake once that was in a waterfall that we had in there for it. It was small enough to get up in the back side of the waterfall where the pump resides, and it was able to curl up in there and essentially just hide. So we ended up having to kind of work it out with a pencil and get it out without hurting the animal. So check the decor, check behind the background if you have one, check under the substrate, and if you have a snake rack, it's more than likely going to be behind the tubs, near the heat source, somewhere in your rack. They typically, if they get out of there, they just hang out on one of the levels. It's dark, it's cramped, it's warm. They don't get very far before they find a nice place to hide. So check those places first. If you've checked those, it's imperative that you are careful from here on out in moving furniture, opening and closing doors. I had a corn snake, unfortunately, once get rolled over in a sliding glass door that had escaped years ago, and it did not survive, unfortunately. But this is, I know I've heard stories of people moving furniture and ending up finding their animal with a laceration or a cut on it. So it's something you want to avoid. Moving refrigerators, freezers, those are good places to look too, because they're going to be hiding. The compressor on the back side of it's going to give off warmth, and it gives it a nice little place to kind of crawl up into that's warm and dark. If you are checking in a dark location, make sure you're using a flashlight so you can make sure you see the animal and don't overlook it. Check closets, any clutter you might have in the area, in the room, in the closet. But again, be careful. You don't want to accidentally toss the snake as you're picking up clutter and tossing it aside. And you don't want to smash it if you accidentally step on a piece of clothing or something that would potentially have a snake hiding under it. Could end in injury or even death for the snake. Ultimately though, these guys will choose, and I've talked about this before in care guide videos, they are going to choose safety over comfort and over food. So your first instinct may be to set a heating pad out in the middle of the room. This probably isn't going to attract them out to the middle of the room. They're going to want a dark and cramped hiding place where they feel safe, and they're going to choose that first over any kind of food, scenting, or warmth. So if you can provide a warm, dark, small, cramped hiding place along a wall for them, and even maybe in a closet, that would be a good place for them to hide. So if you set that up, placing a hide along the wall with a heat pad inside, make sure you put a thermostat on it so it doesn't get too hot and burn the animal if they do get into it. But that's one way to entice them into a designated area that you want so you can eventually find them and grab them. One thing you can do as well is set up a security camera in the room where it was lost and just point it at one of the walls where you think it might travel along, and then you can check the camera footage after you sleep and see if you see it at all. One step further would even be proactively putting a security camera on your enclosures or on your rack that keeps an eye on it. So if the animal does get out and escape, you can go back and look at what time they got out and which direction they may have headed. For us, I got one in the room here where I have all my animals, just in case that happens. So we can go back and check footage if we wake up one morning and there's an animal out of its enclosure. And we have had that happen once or twice before. Another way is to use plastic grocery bags that you get from the grocery store and put those crumpled up along the wall. And then if the snake does travel across them, you're going to hear the crumpling of the bag and know to go check at that moment. Other ways of doing it is when you go to bed, lay some flour on the ground. That way when the snake crawls through the flour, they're going to leave track marks, and it'll give you a good idea of which direction they were headed when you get up in the morning and you want to look for them. The other things to note are it's more likely for the animal to travel downward than upward. In the case of a ball python, some other species may do the opposite. Your dwarf ticks, some of your arboreal snakes are going to go up, but for the most part, your heavy-bodied snakes, even some of your cluebirds, they're going to want to travel downward. So downstairs rather than upstairs, and underneath furniture rather than higher up in high places. Ultimately, these animals can live a very long time in a house, sometimes upwards of a year. I saw a post recently of a keeper who had a house snake escape, and she found it a year later, and it was pretty well grown up, so it had been eating throughout the time it was lost. So they are very well adapted to surviving, especially in a house. One note of caution though is if you do have a snake lost and you know the area it's potentially lost in, keep all your other animals out of that area so they don't end up hurting the snake. At the end of the day though, you're going to want to prepare for when you lose a snake. Because like I said, as a snake keeper, these guys are master escape artists. They will take any opportunity to get out, whether you don't close your lid well enough, you have a lid that's not secured all the way around. They're going to look for weaknesses in your security. So again, security camera on the room. For me, I keep my snakes in a closed bedroom, so I have a draft stopper along the bottom of the door so I know they can't get out of the room just in case they do get out. And I keep the door closed with a sensor on the door so I get alerts if it's left open. And that way I always know if a snake does get out, it's in this room. And it just makes the search that much easier to just look around a smaller confined space. If you have young kids, make sure you have a locking mechanism on all your enclosures. You can't just put a heavy object on top of a cage and a screen lid. I tried this when I first started keeping a ball python in the early 90s, and these animals are extremely strong. They will push through it, and then more than likely the weight of it will come down on their back as they crawl out and damage their scales. So you're going to want some sort of locking lid that has a good distribution of locks throughout the lid and the cage. You could have them just on the ends at times, but if it's a longer lid and that center has some give to it, the snake will push up and squeeze out potentially. For snake racks, make sure you're closing your tubs all the way. Hopefully this video is helpful. I'm really hoping the family in town here is able to find Drogo, the missing boa constrictor, before things start getting too cold outside. Let us know in the comments down below if you guys have any other tips for finding a lost snake that has escaped from its enclosure. Please consider liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell so you get notifications when we upload new videos. Follow us on our socials if you want first access to hatchlings, and we've got some nice ones coming up here, a sunset clutch and a couple of different hypo and albino house snake clutches. And with all that being said, I will see you guys on the next video.